Hi and welcome. My name is Pam Godvoice. Welcome to my online studio. Actually, welcome to my home studio. This is my space where I practice, also known as my guest room, also known as my office. So we do what we can, right? A small space. So we're going to move through a yin sequence today. This is a yin sequence that I wrote for a good friend of mine and yoga student who does a lot of strength training in the lower body and often complains about legs and hips and everything being really tight. So he asked me to put together a sequence. So here it is. So this sequence is an anatomical focus in yin, so it's lower body, and it's not. We won't be talking about the meridians within the body and that stuff. I have other sequences with that stuff in it, but this is strictly anatomical. So we are going to start in dangle. There's one standing pose in yin, and dangle is it. But before we get there, I just want to kind of give you a quick. Although I have a bunch of yoga props, I like to show when I practice in my home studio my kind of home makeshift props that I use. And for yin today, I'm using a blanket. It's actually a quilt that my mom made for me when I was in college, and I love it, and I use it all the time for yoga. So thank you, Mom. So I'm using a blanket, a kind of a nice big fluffy blanket that I can use in lots of different ways. I use it as both as a blanket, as a bolster, kind of makeshift. I have a pillow. I just took this off my couch. My nice Cape Cod pillow reminds me of home. But this is to raise up my pelvis a little bit in seated positions, as well as for padding or anything else. This can also kind of be a makeshift bolster when needed, and also for padding in the upper body. And then I went into the bathroom and stole my 6-year-old's stool. She won't mind. See how cute it is? And I'm going to use this today in place of blocks. So if you have blocks, I'm going to tell you how you can use the blocks. If you don't have a stool like this, the thing I like about this stool is it's a good height because we're going to do squat, but it also gives me the opportunity to have this little ledge because we're going to do some calf work as well. So you could use more pillows for squat. You could use bolsters or blocks if you have them. Or you could even take a book. You know, I have my good old trusty DSM-5, which is about this thick, because I'm also a social worker, and that works perfectly as a block as well for the calf work we're going to do. So just kind of look around, see what you have, be creative. That's what I always do. So let's get started. We'll start in dangle. We're going to hang out there for a few minutes, and while we're in dangle, I'm going to give you my little yin infomercial so you can get all the information about what our practice is for and what we're doing today. So we'll start by, unlike in our yang practice where a forward fold is knees are soft, edges are rounded or whatever, flat lines. In dangle and yin, the idea is just kind of to hang out. And I'll tell you that the first time I did this pose, I got a little angry because I felt like my hamstrings were way too tight and I didn't want my legs to be straight. And so just be open to it. And if this is a nice opportunity, hands to come on a step stool. I have a futon back here, also known as my guest room bed. Forearms or hands can come onto this as well. Use whatever you need. I actually have a window ledge right here. It's another thing that you could use in a pose like this. So we're going to start opening the feet up as wide as is comfortable for you. So it could be hip width distance, it could be wider. For me, I always go wider. It's just what works for me. I'm going to grab my timer so we don't stay here forever. And then allow the legs to straighten and allow the upper body to just relax. So the head's going to release down. You may, if you're looking up, you may see my head lift. It's because I'm reading to you or kind of giving you the lowdown of what our yin practice is all about. If at any time in this pose it feels too much for your head or blood pressure, the forearms can always come to the thighs. This is a nice way to support the pose. Then the head comes forward instead of dropping down. But in our yin practice, we come into a shape. We find the first appropriate edge of resistance. That's that place where your body goes, okay, I can handle this. And then we kind of hang out. And so if we're talking sensation on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being sleep, shavasana, 10 being pain, or one of those crazy like insanity, or everybody's doing hammer and chisel right now. I have some friends that are doing that. Some of that stuff might show up as a 10, or pretty close to. So where we want to be in yin is somewhere between a 2 and a 5 on that scale. And so what that translates to is a dull, broad ache. So no burning or stabbing, no pain in this position. So if this position is too much for you, because of the orientation of the position, you can always do the exact same thing seated. It's called caterpillar. You'd be sitting down, legs out, rounding spine over the legs. And so in this position, or any position we do today, you're going to allow the muscles to relax. And when the muscles relax, the emphasis will get transferred to the dense connective tissue. And the idea with that transfer is that as the dense connective tissue gets the emphasis, it stresses the dense connective tissue. The dense connective tissue responds by sending in reinforcements, which essentially means it makes the dense connective tissue stronger, and it sends in more fluid so that joints move more freely. There's more lubrication, thus mobility in the joints. We're also going to stay in these poses for a longer period of time. So you might notice stay in our poses in yin today anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. And I invite you to stay longer. So if there's a pose that you'd really like to stay in longer, maybe you pause the video, you turn on your own timer, or you pause it when we get to the end and I tell you to switch. Turn on your own timer and add more time in, that's fine. And the fourth piece is really that yin is an opportunity for an introspective practice. It gives us an opportunity to be within ourselves, within our own body, within our own mind. And you might notice some things become very uncomfortable, maybe a little bit more difficult for you. That's okay. The job here in yin is to notice that. And I will tell you that some days my yin practice is a quiet, introspective, meditative practice. In other days, I read a book or listen to loud music or do a crossword puzzle. Anybody that knows me knows that Austin's a lie. I can't stand crossword puzzles. But maybe you do. Maybe you like them. You could do it. We'll take another breath here. From here, we're going to come to a squat. So soften the knees, bring the gaze forward. This helps to regulate the blood pressure. So from here, you might be just coming to a squat. In our yang practice, we call this malasana. And you might hang out here. We're going to be here for a few minutes. So if you want to place a block, a bolster, a step stool underneath your pelvis, you can do so. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use this one today. So you'll notice that the emphasis just shifted in this pose. I'm no longer kind of hanging or having to hold myself up. That's okay. That may be what you need today. So what we want to make sure is that we're still feeling a little bit of compression in and around the hips, the hip flexors, the front of the pelvis. So maybe we hang here, maybe the hands come down and forward. This is also a great place to be if you have knee issues, and classic malasana puts a lot of, so the angle of the knee is very different than here. So do what works for your body. You might be thinking about now, I said we're going to relax the muscles. So the emphasis gets transferred to the dense connective tissue. That doesn't mean every muscle in the body is going to be relaxed in every pose, though. There is a system to this practice. If you haven't done it before, you'll get to see that there is a system to this practice. Well, the transition from dangle to squat is a pretty prescribed transition. And we didn't really do a counter move there because squat to some degree acts as a counter move. What we're going to do between each of our poses is we're going to add in a little bit of movement. So from here, we'll shift forward with the hips lift and sway a little from side to side. Maybe bend one knee and then the other. Maybe you're here. Maybe coming all the way to stand. Shifting a little from side to side. And then from here, we're going to move into a calf stretch. And so this is a move that I do often when I teach ball rolling. But it's not something that I often do in yin, but this was part of the request. So here we go. So I'm going to use, I have this little, you can see it on this side, they're all the same height, this little band, this little crossbar on this step stool, and I'm going to let my right foot come up onto the step stool. Like, so my toes are going to wrap over the top of it. You can do the exact same thing, like I said, with a block or with a book or something of that nature. We'll soften that front knee, have the back foot step out a little. And then come into pose it in yang in our flow practice that we would call pyramid pose, by hugging that right hip back a little, and you'll notice a stretch through the calf. And so when we do this at the same time, trying to allow the leg to get heavy so that the muscles in the calf start to relax a little. So instead of pressing into the toes and lifting, it's kind of allowing things to let go. And if you're in this pose and because of how high or low your toes are, you're feeling like you're not getting much, you can always step the back foot in. I'm not gonna, my calves are pretty tight. But you can always step the back foot in closer, maybe to parallel even. And I really like the stool for this pose because it allows me to place my hands on something, which actually allows me to give some support for the lower body so that the lower body can relax a little bit more. Back knee is bent and supporting. Take another breath here. And then if you have your hands on something solid enough that you can press into, shift the weight into the back foot, press your hands down and then draw that foot off, then do that. If you don't, then you're going to soften that back knee, shift the weight back, and draw up. Either way, you want to take the weight off of that right foot. And then drawing the toe up, heel down. This might be also an opportunity for down dog. A little bit more forward fold. And then once you're ready to, we'll switch over to the other side. So we'll let the left foot come forward. It's going to feel different on each side of the body. So the distance between my front and back leg might be a little different. How straight my front leg is might be a little different. But again, finding the pose, hugging left hip crease back, and then allowing the leg to just release. So instead of engaging any muscles, just allowing it to release. This happens to be a side that I hyperextend on. That's okay in yin. And I've also, just like we will do when we get to dragon, my arms are extended. Some might call them hyperextended, the elbow, to provide support for the lower body. And that's okay as well, as long as you're not going past your natural range of motion, as long as you're not hurting yourself. Take another breath or two here. And again, if you can shift the weight into the hands, into the back leg, maybe even rise up onto that back foot so that you can extend. Maybe it's the knee. So the movement in yin is about countering where the stress is in your body. So it might be the knees. It might be the lower calf or the Achilles, and you do a little up and down. It's up to you. And then from here, once we're ready to, we're going to move into a dragon variation. So I'm going to use this step stool for my forearms along with a pillow. It just adds a little bit of padding. I'm going to be up a little bit high, but that's okay. You don't have to be really low in this pose. You might be somebody that has more space and can kind of be down, forearms on the ground. But I am choosing not to do that today, just for purposes of demonstration. So we're going to start with the left leg forward, just because. And the reason we're all doing the same side is because we're going to move through a short sequence with the same leg as we move through. So we'll start with the left leg forward. So I'll step so that the step stool is not in the way. Right knee back. And so maybe this is a time where you use the blanket under the knee. We come to our forearms here. You'll notice I just kind of sink forward into the pose. It could also be here. I can even be a little lower and be here. actually, maybe this is where I'll stay for today. And so you might decide to stay here, or you might decide to add in a little inner groin on that back leg. And to do so, you're going to bend the back knee, let the foot rotate so that it's half frog position. So you see the rotation, my knee is coming forward, my heel is going back, my toes are turned out. And then from here, I'm going to draw the step stool in a little bit more so that it rotates a little bit to the right. For me, the inner groin psoas attachment is always a little cranky. So this is a good pose for me to add in whenever I am able to. And you can always back out of the pose a little and come back in. And you can always come out at any time. If we're holding for too long for you today, it's just not working, come out. Bail out altogether and do something else, add in some movements, do a down dog, come onto your back and windshield washer the legs. Or maybe you just back out and then come back in. The sensation starts to rise too much on that scale. This is one of those poses for me that can very quickly jump above a 5. And I also want to mention this is a great pose if you're somebody that tends to have low back issues, tightness, or feel like you wake up in the morning and you're like, ugh, I just need to do a forward fold or stretch someone else. I wish somebody could just stretch my back out for me. The attachments for those muscles, the psoas, are actually in the groin. And so that's why this variation, this half frog, half dragon, is a good variation for the psoas. Which for my good friend who happens to be jumping around doing lots of crazy stuff, has lots of impact on the psoas. So I figured we'd add this in. We'll take another breath or two here. Once we're ready to, I'm going to shift the weight back slightly. Let's take a little moment. And then this right leg is going to sweep underneath. My blanket going the wrong way, so I'm going to show that transition again. So we go from here to here. We're in this pose. We shift back, sweep the foot underneath, bring the top leg around, and find an ankle to knee. In yin, this is called square. Yeah, square pose. I always get the yin names messed up. So again, you can be here, sitting upright. For you, this hip might be way up, and maybe you put a blanket underneath it to see if you can get it to release a little. Maybe lifting the pelvis allows for a forward rotation, which allows the hip to rotate a little. Forward rotation of the pelvis gets the hip to rotate a little. Maybe you're someone that this pose forward folds. I'm not that person today. So I'm going to hang out up here. You might notice your first edge of resistance starts to shift. So as I've let go of the tension in this hip, just from sitting in this pose, the hip has started to drop a little. And I'm feeling like I can start to maybe move forward. And that still keeps me within that 2 to 5 range on that sensation scale. And take another breath or two here. Taking our time as we come out of pose. So just as we sink in slowly, we move out slowly. Bring the hands back and then stack the legs, adding a little windshield washering. For me, this pose is all about the rotation of the hip. If ankle to knee, if this pose, you're feeling it in your knee. We don't want any sensation in the knee, but if you're just somebody that has a lot of tightness in the knee, sometimes that happens in runners, then maybe just bending one and then the other. Just kind of sending out and away. And then from here, we're going to move into a half butterfly. So the left leg, which was the leg in front, the leg on top, is now going to be the leg that extends out to the side. So unlike our yang practice, our vinyasa, our flow practice, hatha practice, we're not going to extend out through the leg and lengthen. We're simply going to allow the leg to relax. Whatever direction the foot kind of rotates is just where your body is at. Mine tends to rotate in. It's just where the tension is in my body. So we'll hang here. And then we're going to turn towards this extended leg, and we're going to allow the spine to relax forward and over it. So you might hang here. This might be a good time for a pillow. If you have a bolster can go through along the inside of the leg. A block. The pillow can come to rest on the leg. And start to breathe. Trying to let go. And so oftentimes when we feel tension in the body, especially in the region of the hips, but anywhere in the body, we tend to transfer the tension to other areas when we're trying to release the tension. We have a difficult time just kind of letting go of tension in the body. Have you ever noticed that? Like, oh, my neck hurts, I just going to let go of it. It doesn't seem to happen. And so the same happens in our yin practice. We decide I'm going to let go of this tension so that I can relax into it. And then we start clenching our teeth to let go of the jaw as well. Sometimes we hold our breath, so let go of that restriction as well. Just trying to find as deep and rhythmic a breath as you can. And so coming out of this pose, really being mindful of taking your time, let your hands come down to the mat. Slowly, slowly rising up. Coming back to allow the torso to line up with the pelvis. And oftentimes stretching out this side body, the piriformis, the quadratus lumborum, this whole area. When that dense connective tissue around those muscles gets stressed or strained, it can be uncomfortable if we move too quickly coming out of the pose. So I'm going to switch to the other side. And so we'll come into dragon with the right leg forward. Blanket, shift the step stool. So again, right foot comes down, slide forward, allowing the upper body to be of some support to the lower body. And again, maybe you stay in this dragon position, or if you did so on the other side and want to add in the rotation, frog to the back leg. So we slide back a little, rotate a little, so the upper body starts to swing a little bit to the left. And you're likely to feel this kind of right in that inner groin. Speaking of difficulty letting go, this is definitely an area where we tend to struggle with letting go. And take another breath here. And slowly sliding back. The leg, the left leg, swing around, the right leg stack on top. So this is where we come into ankle to knee. Thought I had my blanket all set. It's coming unfolded on me. Left leg on bottom, right leg on top. And again, maybe utilizing a prop, a stool, something to prop up the upper body. Maybe you just hang here for the time being. I'm starting to notice a decrease in sensation in that hip and feel like I can start to relax forward. And so you don't necessarily need props, you can also be here. And here. Releasing any tension in that jaw. Letting go of any clenching of the teeth. And take another breath here. And again, slowly lifting back through the spine and crossing the legs. I like to lean back, because when you lean back, it allows for a little bit easier time on crossing. Windshield washer. And maybe again, a little extension, draw in, extend out. Finding our way into half butterfly. So the right leg extends. And then we rotate towards that extended leg and allow the spine to relax forward. So one of the things that I haven't mentioned really up until now is that we recognize in yin that the two sides of the body are different, and where in our kind of flowing or fast-paced practice we really try to match side to side so that there's symmetry. In yin we recognize that the body, the bone structure can be different from side to side, and so because of that the release into a pose is going to look different. That's fine. There are other things also like scar tissue and old injuries, so just be aware of that and don't worry about what the body looks like or where you're supposed to be or how come you can reach further down on one side than the other. Just be present in the pose. That's not something that's part of the yin practice to stress about, certainly. And so again, taking your time as you come out of this pose, take another breath in, and another breath out. Removing whatever your supports may be. unless they're still supporting you. Slowly rise back up. Coming back to center, allowing the tissue, both the dense connective tissue and the muscular tissue, to kind of come back to their normal place. Draw both legs out in front. Add in a little windshield washering, allow the hips to move. And so it might just be a little drop from side to side. You might start to lift one side and then the other. You might just come to rock back and forth on the low back. My low back, the back of my pelvis, my SI joints are supported right now on this blanket, so it kind of feels really nice to just rock from side to side. It's like a little massage. And then from here, we're going to move into a baby camel. And so I'm going to turn the direction of my blanket. I'm going to come to kneel on my blanket. And just for the purposes of this pose here, move that. I'm going to bring the pillow and bring it under my seat. So now I'm pretty supported. This pose doesn't hurt my knees at all. If it does hurt your knees, then I invite you to come into a more upright position. Or you can take the pillow out altogether. So here's another option. You might be somebody that has a ton of mobility and that this doesn't hurt at all and that you can drop back in like you would in a reclined hero pose. If that's the case, or a reclined saddle, you can do so. But we're going to come into a pose that I like to call baby camel. And so we'll bring the hands back behind us. And as we press into the hands, we're just going to lift the chest and press the knees forward. So I'm not pressing the pelvis towards the sky as much as I am lifting through the chest and then extending the front of my knees forward over the blanket. And what you start to notice is a little bit of lengthening on the front of the quads. So this is a little bit more yang than it is yin. There are some yin properties here. The stillness being one. And then just finding a head position that works. We're not going to stay here for very long, but some people like to shrug the shoulders and drop the head to be cradled by the shoulders. Some people like to continue to draw the chin towards the chest. Whatever just is more comfortable for you today. And release the hips down. Walk the hands back in. We'll come into a straddle position. So if you need to counter that, if you have any knee issues at all, coming into a down dog to counter that pose might be a good idea. Just takes any of the pressure off of the knees. And again, turning our blanket the long way. I'm going to fold mine up one more time because this is not my favorite pose. But it's helpful, it's beneficial. And so we're going to hang out here for a little while. So I would say get as comfortable as you can. And again, maybe it's back to the step stool, maybe a bolster, a block, maybe just the mat. Maybe you're just allowing yourself to round forward. Maybe the forehead comes to your step stool. So again, just like we did in half butterfly, the legs kind of rotate whichever direction they rotate. And then the upper body relaxes forward. And if you're one of my tight-legged yogi friends, this pose can bring up a lot for you. Oh, just as a quick side note, if you're feeling any stress in the knee that is undesirable, sometimes there's a little bit of opening in the inner knee in this pose, especially if you're rotating forward a little. You can always roll up a blanket and stick it behind the knee, or blocks, something to keep the knees bent. The legs don't have to be straight. But again, if this is an undesirable or an uncomfortable position for you, if you're somebody that tends to be really tight in the back body or have tight hamstrings for whatever reason, a lot can come up in the head in this pose. The first time I took a yin class and we were in this pose for, it felt like it was an hour and a half. It was probably only 5 minutes. I like to tell a story about how I'm like plotting the how to take out my yoga teacher during the practice. I just became so angry because it was so uncomfortable for me. But that gave me a really good opportunity to stop and look at what I was hanging on to and how to kind of come back to the breath and allow the body to relax. And that was years ago, and now I teach yin, and I love it. But I hated it when I started. Hate's not even strong enough word, I don't think. It didn't work well with my body. Now I'm able to find peace with it. It doesn't mean I love every pose. It's more about acceptance, just like the things in life that we have to accept that we don't necessarily always like or even have a difficult time tolerating. But we accept ourselves as we are. We accept our friends and our family. We recognize and accept people's limitations of systems, limitations of our body. If you've ever had an injury, you've maybe had a strong practice and then you've injured yourself and you've had to rehab after an injury, or even just not having nothing to do with a yoga practice, having to rehab after some injury or illness, it can be very frustrating. And we get attached to the way things used to be. Part of the practice of yoga is about offering us the opportunity to let go of that attachment, allowing us to be present in the moment and accepting of our circumstance. And in the exception of that circumstance, we're allowed to grow. And take a few more breaths here. And slowly rising through the spine. I'm just thinking it's interesting that however long ago that was, my first yin class where that pose made me so angry I just almost fell asleep. And draw the legs in. And from here, either windshield washering, or maybe pulling the knees in. So for me, that pose, I have really tight calves, which pull on the back of my knees. So being extended in that pose, I really feel it in the back of my knees, but not in a bad way, just kind of in a stretchy, healthy way, if there is such a thing. So a little bit of compression after that feels good for me, which is why I'm sitting in this kind of squat pose. But you can extend one leg and then the other. You can windshield washer. You can add in any movement that you'd like, maybe a down dog, maybe a cat-cow, whatever works for you. Now the next pose I'm going to offer, for those of you at home that have a yin practice and have a frog practice, a safe frog practice, I invite you to frog at this point. We are going to come into a reclined butterfly. So if you don't have a frog practice, then I ask that you do reclined butterfly with me. And then when you come and practice with me in real life or with, in person or with someone else, or, private via the internet or whatever, that we can make sure that your frog is right for you, because it can put a lot of strain on the knees if you're doing the pose either incorrectly or if you don't have the mobility to be in a full frog pose. But I know some of you out there adore frog. Actually, I know one of my students likes to read in that pose. So if that's the case for you, by all means. Otherwise, we'll come onto our backs. We'll bring the soles of the feet together and allow the knees to drop out. So it's a butterfly pose, but we're going to do it on our back. Clear out some of my props so I have room to lay down. The hands can come to rest on the belly or down by our sides. You might notice as we're here that there's pull on the groin after everything else we've been doing. You might notice none of that. You might feel like, this feels amazing. So if you feel tension or tight, you can always place props underneath the thighs. Another option that I like to use, and I use a lot in restorative classes, is take your blanket, cover your feet with it, tuck it around the side, and then it acts like a little cradle for your legs. And that's kind of a really nice restorative style to this pose. So if you have a little bit more tension, if your knees tend to be up higher, having that nice little cradle can stop from too much pull. If you're looking for more space, pull the feet out of the blanket. And that will create some more space in the groin. And we'll hang here for a little while. Let me turn on my timer so I know how long a little while is. Take another breath or two here. When you're ready to do so, I invite you to slowly draw your knees towards the sky. Heel toe the feet out towards the edges of the mat. Let the knees drop together. And from here, if you'd like to hug the knees in, rock a little from side to side. Maybe you would like at the end of your practice to add in a spine twist. I often like after a yin practice with a lot of yin style holds to do a spine twist, hold for a few breaths. In the spine twist, holding for a few breaths, as opposed to a long yin style twist, just has a different effect on the body. Kind of works to recenter the body instead of twist out and detox more tissue. And then once you're ready to do so, you can extend out into a Shavasana position if you'd like. Maybe the legs are extended. Maybe the knees are bent. I invite you to stay here in your Shavasana, your relaxation, for as long as you see fit. And take this opportunity to let go of attachment. To let go of the struggles of the mind, judgment of self and others. And bring your attention, your awareness to the idea, the concept of acceptance. Acceptance of self, physical self, emotional self. The acceptance of those in our lives. The acceptance of circumstances as they play out. For everything happens for a reason. There is a design, even if we don't know what that design is. Have faith and trust in that design. Om Shanti. Namaste.